Hello and welcome to the 79th episode of In Our Defense. Hi Abhishek, how are
Hi
you?
Dave, how are you doing? I'm very well.
Must be busy, I think. The Israel-Hamas war is the only piece of news I think that's being tracked really well
Yeah,
on
and
websites
for
and
somebody like me
TVs.
who tracks these things, I mean, yeah, this is obviously the biggest news right
Mm.
now. But in between all of this, I managed to find time to sneak out for the India-Pakistan match in
Oh,
Ahmedabad.
wow, lovely.
So yeah, that was more than a hectic
Mm.
weekend. I would say it
Mm.
wasn't a luxury. It was all last minute. It was plans, and it was quite a thriller the way I reached
Right.
to watch the game in the last moment. So yeah, I mean that's part of what's going around
Mm.
because Cricket World Cup is big in India,
Mm.
and yeah, a lot of controversies from there as well. That the Pakistanis were hooted, booed, and things
Yes,
like that.
yes, yes.
I don't know, but I didn't find anything overtly
Mm.
problematic at the ground. Actually, at
Yeah.
least where I was sitting.
No, I think from people who've been there, they said they give the same feedback. Perhaps it was a bit overblown on social media. It wasn't as bad
See,
as
when
it
you have
turned out to be.
a crowd of 1,25,000 something on those lines,
Mm.
judging the behavior of the crowd by 100 odd people or maybe
Yeah,
10 odd
exactly.
people who are seen on
It's a bit
social
much.
media is a bit unfair
Mm.
to so many of us who were watching the game and were extremely well behaved.
Right.
No, in fact, there were a few bad elements where at least where I was sitting, and they tried to sort of vitiate the atmosphere by unruly kind of sloganeering. You know
Mm.
what those are when you play Pakistan, but there was no support.
Yeah.
So I found that pretty good.
Mm. All right. So we're into I think, day 11 of the Israel-Hamas
Mm.
conflict. Last time we discussed this issue, we were just, I think, 2-3 days into
Yeah, it
the
had just
conflict.
started.
So there was a lot of fog of war and a lot of information not in, not out. Now we have a certain better picture of what went down, and that there are at least 199 hostages in Gaza being held by Hamas. That's the Israeli number,
Yeah.
but Hamas has claimed that they have like 50 odd more than what Israel thinks they
Yeah.
have. You also had the US. I wouldn't say kind of softening is its position on the issue, but definitely raising the issue of what's going on in Gaza a bit more than you'd expect, because the West, like we discussed last time, has historically strongly backed Israel
Yeah.
whenever it comes to the Israel-Palestine issue. But you've had the US, Canada, and the other Western allies talk about
Raising concerns.
the humanitarian crisis being unfolded in Gaza, and really pushing Israel to kind of open up a corridor, so to speak, to allow some aid going into it. We've seen some satellite footage which shows how Gaza is basically under darkness because
Yeah.
Israel is
There's no
cut off
electricity.
electricity. There are reports of water running out.
Even hospitals have run out, are
Have run
running
out
out of
of, yes,
electricity
exactly.
and basic needs requirements. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And the ground invasion that many were expecting within a few days of the attack has not yet happened.
Yeah.
Over the weekend, there were some reports of weather being not in Israeli Air Force's favor, so that the ground troops would not have the aircraft that they'd want. Uh, but you've had the bombardment go on and on for the last 10 days, and you also saw a lot of you're still seeing a lot of propaganda from both sides, something that we experience a lot during the India-China
Yeah, IW, information
ongoing.
warfare. We've discussed that so many times.
Crucial aspect
Yeah.
of warfare. Just like last time, not very sure where to begin, but I think the most interesting question that's been in my head, and the thing that I keep wondering, and I briefly touched upon it last time as well, what happens when Israel decides to go in? Because we've discussed how parts of Gaza have been reduced to a rubble, makes the geography makes it very difficult. You have reports of Hamas having this vast network of underground tunnels where supposedly it hides its weaponry and its personnel, etc., etc. It's a battlefield of quite. It's not something that when you see a battlefield, you usually picture something far off, something tanks shelling each other. It's a large field where guns are being pointed by the two warring factions. This is gonna be like close quarter urban warfare, something that was last seen probably during the World War II, like we discussed last time as well. Your take on this first?
Well, first of all, a sense of deja vu is introduced. You said it's the 11th day, and we're not sure how long this is going to take.
Yes.
Uh, the fact that this comes in the backdrop of the still raging war in Ukraine, where experts had just written of Ukraine in a matter of 7 days, 10 days, months, and what we have
More than
2 years now, almost
nearly 2 years.
nearly 2 years. February will be 2 years. A similar thing is panning out here, and just gives you a sense that conflict and wars are not fought on paper,
On paper,
they're fought on ground.
yes.
And something similar is panning out here because, see, just flattening Gaza is perhaps one option, but there must be something that's stopping Israel from doing that, isn't it? You rightly said that at some point of time, a ground invasion is necessary if you sort of want to not just take control of physically take control of ground zero, but flush out the Hamas terrorists that you are speaking of,
Which Israel stated is their only objective.
isn't it? So the place is cramped up, and most of the action is in north of Gaza. There have been advisories by Israel saying that people should shift to the southern parts. And if that happens, they are hoping that the ones staying in the north side will all be Hamas fighters. That's the assumption. Now that's a big challenge in a situation like this, when you start your offensive based on an assumption, isn't it? Because you really don't know who's who.
Yeah.
So there could be homes that have little babies, and you could, in the same homes, you could have somebody who's not just a Hamas sympathizer, but a Hamas fighter. So how do you fight this war? That's number one. Secondly, the place is so cramped up, about 2 million people, 15,000 people living per square kilometer.
Yes.
One of the most densely populated regions in the world. Narrow lanes, minarets, buildings, the fear of getting ambushed. I mean, it's a classic case of you walking in and getting ambushed.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the same. I mean, it is that place could be booby trapped till kingdom come. For all we know.
I mean, booby traps again are the second option, or the second fear that I'm sure the Israeli ground forces will be thinking of. See, Israel does have specialized units for this kind of warfare because they prepare for this.
Of course.
But it's okay that you war game, you exercise, fine. But real threats sometimes are difficult to be war gamed. And real threats like this is not conventional war. As you said, that conventional war is about large fields, tanks moving, heavy armor moving, artillery. That's where a lot of operational things come in, ground tactics come in. So here the only ground tactic is to make sure you don't get ambushed.
Yes.
So when you're fighting on the front lines, getting ambushed is not one of the fears that you have, isn't it? I mean, you might get struck by the Air Force. You might your locations might be hit by tanks, or artillery could be used against you, and then the ground troops would come in, zero in, and take occupation. The Israelis are not going. The Hamas are not going to be moving around with tanks.
Yes.
See, something similar happened in Ukraine when Russians moved in with heavy armor, only to realize that they'll get ambushed. So they were fine till they were in the countryside. Because in the countryside, it was not possible to get ambushed. But the moment they came into the cities, I saw those places where not even tall buildings, just second, third floor of a building. I was told that, we made sure that we fire from here. And simple, just shoulder-held weaponry that can target tanks. So definitely taking tanks is not an option for the Israeli forces there. What they are focusing right now is on a lot of airstrikes, missiles, to pinpoint those locations that have Hamas fighters. But you briefly mentioned the underground tunnels.
Yes.
Well, now that's something nobody really exactly knows of.
Yeah.
Even in Israel, despite their large, high-tech intelligence.
It's the whole point of being underground.
That's the point of being underground. So you don't know what lies in there. It's called Gaza's metro, by the way.
Yes.
That's the network they have. That's the euphemism, that it's like a metro network. How they've built is again, something that needs to be pondered, because it's taken years. So not, by the way, some of the hostages are supposed to be in those,
Supposed to be there.
in that maze of tunnels and underground facilities. So one, those tunnels help the Hamas with maintaining secrecy, sort of blinding the enemy. Movement cannot be tracked. You don't know how many guys are there at one location and how quickly they can move to another location and then get overground.
Yes.
All their weaponry is, again, safe. Their weaponry cannot be hit. And that weaponry also moves around from one location to another location without the adversary, without the enemy getting a whiff of it. Big problem. So I don't see a full-fledged ground invasion taking place overnight. A lot of assessments will be made. If it happens, it will probably happen in stages, different phases. What sort of teams are used will be another thing. Because, see, there are two ways of going in for this invasion. One is Israel says, okay, we are prepared for heavy casualties, but we need to win the war. Professional armies can't really think like that, because if there are heavy casualties, you've not really won.
Yes.
The other way of looking at it is that, yeah, there's a cost for winning, and we are willing to pay that cost. But that's more of a jihadi, terrorist kind of way of thinking. That's exactly what Hamas did.
Yes.
Also, from a tactical point of view, there is a sense, that's a lot of commentary that I've read, where former Israeli soldiers, officials have been quoted saying that this is exactly what Hamas wanted, that we should enter that there. So it's a kind of a trap. The fact that a lot of people who are, I've read commentary where serving soldiers have been quoted saying this. So there is a sense that this is not a knee-jerk kind of a thing, and they know what they are getting into. I think the last time Israel entered Gaza was probably 2014 or 15, was it?
Yeah.
So they've not done that for a while again. So yeah, it will be more than a challenge, and that remains the most defining aspect of this war, if you want to call it. How will the Israeli professional military deal with terror outfit like Hamas, which has a professional military network, near professional military network, if I dare say so. I just want to differentiate here. They have a professional network, but they have a mindset
of terrorism. Yes.
So that's a deadly combination.
Yeah.
And here you are not just fighting those fighters, you're fighting the ideology. And if it's true that homes have young boys who are fighters and at the same time babies in the same house, then I'm not sure how can you win the war just by the ground invasion. A lot of people have shifted down south to Gaza. They are homeless and things like that. Again, as we discussed last time, centuries old conflict.
Yeah.
I don't think it can get settled by just ground invasions.
Right. I like the point you made, the last point you made, because when you refer to like drawing a parallel between the current conflict in Israel and Gaza and Russia-Ukraine, the thought that came to me, but the one crucial difference is that those are two nations at war.
Precisely.
Here you have a nation against a terror group that functions like a military, has a full setup of a military, but the mind of a terrorist. Basically not ready to follow the rules of war. So they might commit they already have the whole spark of this current crisis was this massacre that took place in Israel near the areas close to Gaza. And they could do the same while fighting the Israeli forces. And you know what, the part about the tunnels, if I am not, but if I was a military planner, the thought that came to me even the last time was the best thing to do. I mean, best is not the right perhaps word to use, but as a military planner, one of the things that you could think of is letting the ground forces coming and literally blowing up the ground beneath them, if that is even possible, as
No,
one
for
strategy.
that, again, you need to know where those tunnels are.
That is my point, and that is my question.
So
And
the,
how
the,
do you?
the,
That is one
that
of the
is,
biggest
yeah.
risks then.
So because you don't
Because
know
how do
where
you
those
war game
tunnels
something
are,
you probably have no idea
yeah,
about?
so not knowing whether those tunnels are, I mean, blowing up those tunnels is the big task.
Yeah.
If those tunnels are blown, Hamas collapses. But that's the whole idea of having tunnels, isn't it? That if you don't know where they are, see, they cannot be bombed. You need ground intelligence.
Yes,
you will
of
only
course,
get
of
ground
course.
intelligence once you enter there.
Enter there.
So that's the
Catch-22.
yeah. I mean, that's the double jeopardy with with the way this war is moving, and that's why I said that there's a sense of deja vu that this could be a long haul again.
And I'm so glad you brought up Russia, Ukraine. You've seen that, with your own eyes. You went there for a period of a month or so, I think, during the initial part of the war. That is something I actually wanted to bring. Do you think one of the reasons we haven't seen an all-out ground invasion yet, one of the reasons we are seeing Israel's response a bit, let's say, slower than what people initially thought it would be, is also that thing running in the background of how what happened in Russia-Ukraine war did not really go according to Russia's plans. So Israel is a bit
No,
like,
that's for us storytellers to sort of talk about. I'm not sure if the Israeli forces are really drawing a parallel between.
I'm not talking about drawing parallels. What I'm talking about is drawing lessons from another conflict. I mean, I'm pretty sure
Again,
that's
I don't
what
think
all professional
I don't think
militaries
so
do.
because that's a different kind of a war that's happened there. And as you rightly pointed out, they're not fighting terrorists. They're fighting states military. This is definitely a different ball game. And as I said, that it would be naive to say that the Israelis are completely clueless about all of this because that's the only war that they are bothered about, at least in the last few years. Hamas. I mean, yes, they have fought wars with all their neighbors coming in, all four neighbors, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt in the south. So they've gone through that conventional war. But yeah, I mean, that didn't seem like, it doesn't seem like that in today's world it will happen. You might have, again, Hamas, attacking. Hamas is based out of Lebanon. But again, Hamas is not
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah. Hezbollah is based out of Lebanon. So Hezbollah is not Lebanon.
Yes.
Again, it's an outfit which wields a lot of power in Lebanon, a lot of influence. And the influence goes beyond their military might. They are a powerful political outfit as well. And that's the reason why they are influential. But even for Hezbollah to do that, it needs some kind of sanction from the Lebanon state. And how far is Hezbollah wanting to do that? We'll get to know a little later. But all those are possibilities. There have been already a few skirmishes, I believe, between the Israeli forces and Hezbollah.
Yes.
Yeah, so there is a fear of this conflict expanding. And if that happens, again, those challenges for Israel will be more. As we discussed, I think we touched upon this last time as well. It doesn't seem likely that you'll see an overnight ground invasion and Hamas will be decimated.
Yeah. And one of the other reasons and one of the other things that we're playing on is really military strategic mind and even the politicians is also the fact that there are Israeli hostages in Palestine. Sorry, in Gaza.
In Gaza.
Even though a lot of people, on social media and elsewhere have, referred to what is known as the Hannibal Doctrine, so-called. It's, I won't say it's a myth, but there is no record of it, is what my research threw up. No official document, no on the record quotes, just like a lot of chatter about it on in the Israeli media, which essentially talks about having this no holds barred hard attitude when it comes to hostages, and like you're just not negotiating with whoever. Even though Israel has, by the way, a history of negotiating.
No, there have been prisoner swaps and all. So
Swaps,
these
yeah,
are,
yeah, yeah.
see, there is a lot of myths that go around.
Exactly. With
There have been official prisoner swaps
Yes.
that Israel has done
Yeah.
with the Palestinians
Yeah.
in the past. And make no mistake about it that they'll do it again if, see, it's the art of negotiation. What are you negotiating is what is at play. I don't think swapping, exchange of prisoners or prisoners of war and things like that are always. It's a very simplistic thing to see that ghutne tek diye. It's not like that.
Yeah, it's about the larger
yeah,
objective. I mean,
yeah.
what are you gaining by doing it, for
Yeah,
example?
yeah. So, and Israel has done that in the past.
Yeah.
So I don't know from where do these things spring up.
This, I think, is what we spoke about even last time. This sort of halo that there around the Israeli defense.
Yeah, and
setup.
I'm not sure
And
if it's all over the world. It's more in India. Have you realized this?
I think so. I think so. It's more in India, actually. I really think so.
I don't think that. See, no military can take things for granted. हल्के में मतलब होता है ना कि हल्के में ले लो. How can you do that?
Yeah.
So there
In
is.
fact, I'll give you an example. Most people don't realize this. You know this famed Israeli show Fauda?
Yeah, I've watched.
I think
all
it's more popular in India than anywhere else.
I think so.
If you go on IMDb, if you go to see reviews, you'll see that a lot of Western media hasn't even covered the show.
I'll tell you why. Because it suits our narrative. घर में घुस के मार दिया. You know, that kind of
Yes.
chest thumping that we like to do when it comes to security and military matters. It just fits into that bracket. I mean, I like the show. I'm not saying that it's bad. It was well made. And when I watch such shows, I look at them beyond ghar mein ghus ke maar diya kind of a situation. Because for me, what is most striking about Fauda is the humanizing of these so-called no negotiating anti-terror Israeli fighters. There is a soft side to them, which is very clearly shown in the show, which doesn't actually fit into the narrative that everybody. But for me, it was that.
It's a fantastic point,
and it also, in a very subtle manner, very subtle, not explicit, sort of judges the Israeli way of functioning. It does show you a Palestinian point of view that Israelis can go to all extent, at least their forces, to deceit and cheat us with human emotions. Because in a lot of those stories, the main character,
the star, Doron,
sort of wins trust of people.
By playing on their emotions, and then goes on to...
And this is what bothers him. That's the character, isn't it? So in a very subtle way, raises questions on...
Actually, I wouldn't say very subtle. It's quite there.
It's quite there if you want to watch it that way.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
If
you want to watch it that way.
If you want to only watch the part of, these commandos going into Gaza and just creating havoc and coming back with, successful missions. That
playing with human emotion. The last one, the last season was where they use a Muslim Israeli.
Yes.
They use a Muslim Israeli Air Force officer whose husband is Jewish.
Yes.
Isn't it? I think that was the last one. That was really in your face. That they sort of didn't even trust her somewhere. They used her, whatever. I mean, good plot, interesting watch. And it also, again, for some it could be subtle, for some it could be in your face. It does raise questions that our security can be breached.
Yes.
That's what has been shown in those stories. That they did breach and we are responding. So if they are themselves saying that we can be breached, I don't know why should people in India just get a sense and feeling that no, this is just a perfect system and nothing goes wrong there.
Right. But, coming back to the real world, person who follows military across the world, how would you rate the actual Israeli defense setup, its military? How advanced, how solid, how capable are they?
No, extremely advanced. There's absolutely no doubt. Big on tech.
Ah.
But that's the hurdle now.
Because I don't think tech will help a lot in this case.
You need, to fight guerrillas, you need guerrilla warfare. And it's not that Israelis cannot do that. And that's exactly what has been shown in Fauda, that it's not the conventional forces that are doing the job.
Yes.
You need these small teams entering in, disguised, mixing up with people. So those are the specialized anti-terror units that they do have. But that's possible when, this is now you're getting into a phase where it's a bit of a conventional war. And at the same time, you need to use those unconventional methods to win this. So that's the double jeopardy that will ensure that this gets delayed. This conflict gets longer and longer. In normal circumstances, when there is no fighting happening, then your covert guerrilla kind of specialized urban warfare, small teams can go in, do the job and come, mix with the crowd. Here looks a little out of place.
Yeah.
Who will you mix with?
Yeah, exactly.
If there are no families there.
Because you are the one who told them to go south.
Yeah. So those kind of things. If there is no fighting happening, then those teams can be extremely effective, as has been shown in Fauda. But now you've entered a stage where the environment is of a conventional war, but you're fighting an unconventional enemy.
That's an interesting point. We'll discuss more on this, but after a quick break.
I have with me today two key members of a company called Immunil Therapeutics. And they're doing something super significant. They're conducting trials for CAR T in India. And if these go well, we'll be able to provide this treatment to Indian patients at a fraction of what it is priced at abroad. When can we actually see this treatment to be rolled out in India? And can you eventually put it to use for other cancers?
I think I have to be very careful in answering this question. But we filed India's first marketing authorization application this year.
Right.
And the results are very encouraging, and we've presented it globally. But the regulatory review process is driven by a statutory body for all drugs. And so I shouldn't comment on how they would look at the file and how they would look at this data. But I'm hopeful that the process will conclude in a timely way. And if all goes well, perhaps by the end of this year, we should see patients in India providing access to those patients in India will become a reality. Patients in India are waiting, and we hear from physicians across the country that they've been asking about this therapy. We're engaged with the scientific community, and we believe that these kinds of treatments could greatly benefit patients, especially if they're also able to create accelerated review pathways similar to what I'd mentioned previously, like breakthrough designations and priority reviews.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think a decade ago, if somebody had talked about blood cancer having a potential cure, you wouldn't have believed it. So, I mean, we are at the cusp of revolution happening in cancer treatment. Could you say that the story of this treatment success, it means that going forward, there's going to be more hope for cancer patients than ever before?
I would say, in a word, yes. Of course, with responsibility. See, in the last 40 years, I'd mentioned, we have not seen such dramatic responses in leukemias, lymphomas, and myelomas with this class of products called CAR T therapies. Take the case of the poster child for leukemias. Her name is Emily Whitehead. She's recognized across the world as the first patient to have received a CAR T. I think it was in 2011 or 2012 when she was 7 years old and literally weeks from passing. And recently, she celebrated 10 years of being cancer-free, all with one infusion. We have our own Indian equivalent on our Imagine trial as well. I think Imagine has given us the power to imagine what remission from cancer could mean to patients across India and other underserved regions.
Yes.
And application of CAR T therapies is today more and more in the blood cancer space, but we are starting to see globally people adopting this technology towards other forms of cancer, especially organ cancers.
Welcome back. Abhishek and I are discussing the events of the last 10, 11 days in Israel, where Israel is fighting a war with Hamas and has completely blockaded Gaza, leading to a humanitarian crisis. There's no water, there's no food, there's no medicine, there's no electricity. There are indications that there might be some softening in Israel's stand when it comes to the blockade because of a lot of pressure being put by the West, especially the US and the UN. How much do you think the morality of the situation would be playing on the generals or the politicians planning the next few months of this conflict? Because and I've always wanted to ask this and think an actual conflict is the perfect time to ask it. The image of military generals across the world, I'm not just talking about Israel, is there tough people who can keep their emotions away and just focus on the job at hand, etc., 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 etc. But does that actually, are there zero emotions involved when it comes to making such plans? You have your military surrounding Gaza and ordering and ensuring there's no food, there's no aid. Does this not play on your mind at all? What do you think? You've interacted with lots of them. Indian definitely, also a few foreign on your various junkets. So
It's a difficult thing to say. I don't think that you can burden yourself with a lot of moral issues.
Achha.
How do you go about the job then? See, your objectives have to be clear. I mean, your first objective is to get the job done, but at the same time to make sure that you don't face casualties, you are safe, and that's a big moral decision as well. Because if you just go in thinking, as I briefly said before, that I won't care about what's going to happen to us. We have many guys who can come in and fight. It doesn't work out like that, because morale can actually take a dip if suddenly you have 100 casualties. It's not an easy decision to take. In this conflict again, because this whole thing is again driven with a lot of emotion, historic baggage that the two sides carry. Both think that they are fighting a moral war.
Yes, actually, that's a good point. There's no strategic goal over here, actually, if you think about it.
So when both of you think that you are fighting for the right, then it's difficult to judge what is morality.
I think that's a very good point you've made, because you've come to think of it, there's no geographical reason for Israel to want or not want Gaza and for Palestine to not want or want Jews, etc. This is, like you said, a religious
and it's so different
conflict.
From our point of view, our perspective. We fought for Siachen. Nobody lives there. That was purely strategic.
Yes.
We are fighting for Ladakh. We want to make sure that China doesn't take away that land. Nobody lives there. You can say, why are you fighting? And I think that's the most nonsensical argument that I hear from people. That what are we fighting for? And isn't that the big difference between the Indian perspective of a war? India fought the 1971 war, I think, was the biggest war India has fought. It was purely for strategic goals.
Nothing to do with our country, by the way, apart from the refugee crisis.
Strategic goals. Everything was strategic. It had something that was impacting your country. It wasn't religion. It wasn't some community. So this is a different. I mean, I keep on trying to explain to people that don't try and judge in this who's right and who's wrong, and don't. I mean, it's so easy to take sides in these kind of wars, and giving it an ideological color. They're not fighting an ideological war. It's not an ideological conflict. It's not political ideology. It's what they believe is right. And the genesis of it is their religious right. It cannot be explained. It's only those people who are fighting for that cause can understand.
In fact, ironically, to take forward your India example, the only reason for which India is not fighting, yet, even though there have been lots of statements made on this, which is the one that has some emotional connect to it, which is POK. Because like we discussed in an episode, I think a few months ago, that POK strategically does not hold much value. It's a purely emotional thing. So you have statements कि हम तो वापस ले लेंगे POK. But आज तक तो try नहीं करा है ना 47 के बाद. It's been there with under Pakistani occupation since then.
And see, again, religion can be a point of view as far as Pakistan is concerned to take over.
Has been.
Has been. It is.
It's the genesis of the country.
Yeah. So that's why they believe that automatically, that they have a right over Kashmir. But that's not the Indian point of view. And as I said last time, that if we did not, in the last episode, that if we did not have our own version of how the partition should have happened, we would be in Israel. And I'm reiterating that again. Because there would be a Kashmir, there would be a Hyderabad, there was already an East Pakistan, there was a West Pakistan. And you never know. Going down the line, there would be, in post-independent India, there could be claims and demands for several other Muslim-dominated pockets.
Yes, definitely. Within cities, perhaps.
Yeah,
this community,
what has been called ghettos today, a Muslim ghetto today, you could have had a separatist movement starting there.
Of course.
So it did not happen because of our leaders at that point of time, which I time and again stress upon. And there's an interesting take on this, in fact, that why India and the leadership at that point of time was arguing why Kashmir needs to be an integral part of India. And this is a very simplistic argument that just because the partition has happened on grounds of religion, it should not automatically lead to every area being divided on lines of religion. Because India's take was that it would be even more natural for an Indian secular state to have areas in the country where the minority is in majority.
Yes.
That was the whole purpose. So to say that this part is the Pakistani argument, if you want to call it so, that this part is Muslim dominated, hence we should have it, was not something that was in sync with the Indian secular state. And to some extent, Indian political leaders at that point of time were able to get this straight, put this across to the British. The model of partition was exactly the same. Exactly what they planned for India and what they planned for Palestine.
Yes.
On the basis of religion, whoever is where, if this part is Muslim dominated, it goes to this. If this part is Hindu dominated, it goes to this. We did not allow it to happen.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the reasons we supported Palestine initially, still do, as far as the idea of having Palestine is concerned, is that because British wanted it that way, we will just not.
Precisely. That's one of the very, very strong reasons why India.
Because you did that to us, we know.
Yeah.
So we won't let that
and
happen.
it was happening simultaneously.
Yes.
It was at the same time. Both countries got independence in 47.
Yeah.
And now that we are on the Indian point of view, we can digress a bit. I've come across a lot of very simplistic arguments that it's this government that has taken relations with Israel to another level.
I've read the whole
it's
timeline. I've seen the timeline. It's not. It was happening gradually over the years.
It was happening. And see, it was back in 1950 that India recognized Israel.
Yes.
It's not as if you did not recognize Israel. In 1992, you started diplomatic ties. Diplomatic ties don't happen for something like this. They wouldn't have happened overnight. No?
Of course.
It probably would have taken 5, 6 years, 10 years, a decade to ensure that, okay. So if it's happened in 1992, firstly, the decision has not been taken in 1992 for sure. It's gone through a lot of planning. Another thing which comes to mind is when people say Prime Minister Modi was the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. Well, he was. There's no denying the fact. He's also the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Palestinian-held territory.
Ramallah, yes. It was during that visit.
And during the same
during
visit.
the same visit.
President Pranab Mukherjee in 2015 was the first Indian president to visit Palestinian-controlled areas. Both under this government. So that's why, I always try and explain to people that don't fall for simplistic arguments because these things are anything but simple.
Definitely. Because anyway, I mean, when it comes
Don't
to,
fall for it.
Yeah, when it comes to diplomacy, you'll probably see the effects of the Modi government 10 years down the line. You won't see them right now.
yeah.
That's how diplomacy is. That's how it works. You sow the seeds. It's your future prime ministers who then
Yeah.
decide what to do with
And
it.
yes, it's a fact that Prime Minister Modi and this government has tried to enhance ties with Israel, but you can't call it a deviation from the past. No, it's not something that's completely new. It's work in progress. I would call it a big deviation from the past if you said that we don't believe in the Palestinian cause.
Yes, actually.
That would be a big shift from your stand. Yeah, there are subtle, and that's how diplomacy works in subtle ways. It's no direct ki ye kar diya, wo kar diya. It doesn't happen like that. And even right now, you see, when the first statement of Prime Minister Modi was that we stand by the people of Israel. That's the stated Indian line when it comes to terror
Yes, for any country.
for any country.
You're in a moment of crisis, our people stand with your people.
You've been hit by a terror strike.
Because we know what it
We
means.
condemn terror.
Yes.
And then there was an MEA statement which reiterated the Palestinian cause. The point I'm trying to make is that you can be friends of Israel and at the same time advocate for a peaceful resolution
To the
of
Palestinian
the
question.
Palestinian-Israel conflict.
While also noting the need to fight terrorism. And I think the MEA statement during the press conference you're talking about, delivered by the spokesperson.
And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's how it should be. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah, delivered by the spokesperson, who's now, by the way, been appointed to the UN as a permanent representative, was a fantastic statement.
Yeah.
It's finest example of what diplomacy is all about.
Now, to translate this, that Indian support for Palestinian cause was only to sort of appease Muslims in India is a very simplistic.
Yeah, it's a very simplistic. I completely agree with you on that point.
Because see, getting into a bit of political domestic issues here, if it's only about Muslim appeasement, today's BJP doesn't really need Muslim appeasement to come to power.
Yes.
So then why are they standing with the Palestinian cause?
Definitely. I mean, the BJP's stated on record that Muslim appeasement done by the Congress was counterproductive for the country.
Yes.
That's their stand.
Isn't it?
So that's a fundamental difference with the Congress party.
So then why shouldn't this translate into the same language?
Of course.
If that was done for appeasement, then today's India stand today, at least the BJP stand today, shouldn't be this.
Yeah.
That's where it goes on to show that a country stand and a party stand, please try and differentiate between the two.
And get the nuance of when it comes to matters like these. Before we wrap up, by the nice bit of digression on India, I think that really added some
it was
extra
just came in
value
naturally,
to the conversation. But going back to Israel, and one point on which I want to end this episode on is a report that came up over the weekend that US President Joe Biden has been briefed by his officials that they believe Israel doesn't really have a plan for what happens after it invades Gaza, if it chooses to do so, as the indications are.
I think Biden also has said, has he, that Israel will be making a mistake if they just...
Oh, yes, he did. This was the same weekend.
Yeah,
the same weekend when this report came out, Biden said it would be a catastrophic mistake. My question is not more to do with the tactics and the ground operations and how they'll go out flushing out the Hamas terrorists, which we've discussed in the first half. My question is, actually, yes, if you invade, let's say you end up occupying the whole of Gaza, what next? Because you'd have Egypt and Jordan clearly saying, we are not going to take those refugees, Palestinian refugees. And this is something, and there's a point you made last time, a very subtle but very important point, that one of the reasons Israel never perhaps has wanted to control Gaza is if it took in Gaza and West Bank as its territories, Jews probably would be a minority in the region. So then what happens to Gaza? Let's assume ki kar liya, Hamas is annihilated.
No, I mean,
whatever.
To look at it hypothetically, and the high moral ground that Israel would ideally want to take is that we flushed out Hamas, we've finished Hamas, like LTT was finished in Sri Lanka, and Muslims of the area can live peacefully.
Under Israeli occupation?
No, they leave. They leave Hamas. They leave Hamas and they say, okay, they leave Gaza. And for that, they have to make this claim, big claim, that it's free of Hamas. And I don't know, I mean, if that happens and if it ends in a
That
peaceful
is the two-state
resolution,
solution.
that, yeah, to some extent. But still, the West Bank areas will be
Of course.
contested how you deal with that. But if they are able to do that, I mean, that's the victory that they should be aspiring for.
Yeah.
Ending Hamas.
Yeah. But just to clarify to our listeners and viewers, again, what we did is what we said we shouldn't do. This is too simplistic a way of answering the question. But it was my question, and it's a hypothetical question and a hypothetical answer.
Now, that's why I said that, looking at it hypothetically.
But doubt that will happen, at least in the near future. Think this is going to be another long haul, like you said at the beginning of this episode. But one last point. Because you said about making assumptions and how at times they can go horribly wrong and it's risky, can we make this assumption for sure that no matter what, you'll have the US with Israel if needed militarily? The reason I'm asking is what you said earlier, that at the end of the day, Israel is a small country surrounded by countries not
inimical states, who they believe are
you have Egypt.
Yeah, Lebanon, I mean, they have fought wars.
And you have their proxies, Hezbollah, like you said. There is this belief that as long as these guys stay away, perhaps the West will stay away. But if, let's say, Iran chooses to get involved, let's say if Hezbollah chooses to get involved and Israel is pulled on multiple fronts, then perhaps there might be military backup.
There's a big escalation then, and it would mean an extremely large-scale war.
A world war, you mean?
Sort of. I mean, whatever name you want to give it, whatever nomenclature you want to give it. But imagine Iran and US getting involved militarily in this conflict. That would be an escalation that the world has not seen since the World War. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, so that would be a world war. And, growing up, I never thought one day I'd be sitting in a cubicle, not a cubicle, this is a room, in a room and still discussing wars. And especially like you said, the last episode, a war over religious disagreements and discussing the prospect of a world war, that too, by the way. We discussed that during the Russia-Ukraine.
There is a book, The Clash of Civilizations.
Oh, I've read it.
By Samuel Huntington.
Fantastic.
So the premise of that book is that all civilizational differences, clashes eventually are because of religious differences. Again, historically, I'm not a great writer or a thought leader like Huntington is, but I have my right to have a view. I think again that's a little simplistic understanding of things, if I may say so. But yeah, there is something to ponder over it. Why I say that, at least as a student of history, why I say that civilizational and religious differences cannot be the same, because what was Indus Valley is not the religion that we follow as quote-unquote Hindus. So, I mean, if you really get into nuances and you get deeper into the subject, things get really confusing.
I think perhaps the reason you find that too simplistic is probably because of the use of the word religion. Because I think the way I look at it, religion, just like any other, anything that's part of your core belief could probably lead to a conflict with somebody else's belief system.
Which are the oldest civilizations? Let's look at that way. India, Indus Valley,
yes.
Chinese civilization, Mesopotamia, which is current day Middle East, Iraq, if I may say so. Again, Mesopotamia, the religion being followed there was not Islam. So civilizational is not a synonym for religion.
That's exactly my point. That your clash of civilizations happens because of your
Greek civilization. That civilization was not Christian.
Yes.
So that's where I find that understanding a little simplistic. Yeah, you can say modern day wars could be a clash of religions, where there could be civilizational differences or something like that. But it's an interesting point of view.
No, it is an interesting point of view because I think, like you were discussing about the India example, the parallel, where it comes to clashes over religion, clashes over belief systems, there is no negotiation. With strategic objectives, you can still have a negotiation.
Yes.
You as a country want this area, I as a country do not want to give you this area. We can still come to a table and decide, you take this much, I'll take this much. when it comes to a clash of our beliefs, there's no negotiation.
There's no
You can't convince me not to believe in something,
not
right?
at all. Not
So
at all.
the only option is then either to
And
stay away.
beliefs are largely where rationale and logic ends.
Ends, exactly.
You're not expected to, when people say, what's the logic behind this? I don't want to get into religious beliefs because that would be really, really controversial.
Yeah.
But most of the religious beliefs are things that are not logically possible.
Yeah.
I can give 100 examples.
Which perhaps is the reason for the question I asked before the episode, before the break, is how do you decide just to blockade 2 million people, knowing that within 10-15 days they'll be starving to death? Perhaps this kind of answers the question to our listeners and viewers, because that's been on my mind a lot the last few days. Thanks, Abhishek, again. I think we managed to have a much better chat than last time, because obviously now we have
Picture
picture is
slightly
much
clearer,
yeah. Much clearer.
Or is it more foggy?
Oh.
I don't know what to
Yes.
say. But yeah, there is a lot that has happened.
Yes.
A lot many developments that have happened, and one can foresee where this is headed.
Yeah. And my prediction is, at least for the next few days, is there's something going on behind the scenes we are not able to see.
Oh, of course. See, make no mistake about it that Israelis would want to respond with the kind of secrecy to counter the secrecy.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the whole point. Why should we be knowing what they are planning?
Yes.
So it's not that they are not planning what needs to be done operationally on the ground. I'm sure they are. And they need to have plans which cannot be foreseen by Hamas.
Yes, exactly. So we'll keep a close eye on another conflict that is going on in this world, and we'll keep discussing as and when we have some new developments happening. Thanks, Abhishek.
Thanks, Dave. And it was interesting that, discussing Israel-Palestine, we discussed Russia, Ukraine, we discussed civilizations.
Yes.
We, of course, if you're discussing something like this, you have to discuss religion.
Yes.
You get into history. So that's what makes such conversations enriching, if I can say so.
Yes. And that's what, personally speaking, that's what my fascination with the world of defense is all about. It's not to do with the flashy guns.
No.
It's about this. It's about the fundamental.
That's just good visuals,
Yes.
and that looks good on TV and things like that. But these are, at the end of the day, the world of defense and the world of military and fighting is linked to all of this.
Yes.
To history, to religion, to strategic goals.
Human psychology.
Human nature, everything.
Yeah.
Politics.
Definitely. Right. Thanks. Like you said, great chat. And thanks to our listeners and viewers. Thanks also to our producer, Anna Priyadarshini, and a message from us as always. Do let us know what you think of this episode or our podcast in general. If you want, drop a text to us at 8588966996. That's also the number for our WhatsApp channel, to which you can subscribe and just, ensure that you get all updates from us whenever a new episode is out. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with your passport. Bye-bye.